The most important part of your software development journey are coding projects, and these coding projects are good for your development as a programmer, and also this is how you provide value to the world. And because coding projects are really important, you start to see a lot of questions periodically on Reddit about how to start a coding project. So how to start a coding project, how to actually start building your own project, when to start coding projects, and all these questions about how to start a project. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to start a coding project and how to come up with the idea for your next coding project, and also talk about my own coding projects that I've done in the past, how I came up with them, and hopefully that's an encouragement for you. And I'll be sharing 3 different things that you should know when it comes to starting your own coding projects. And then at the end, I'll share some encouragements that you should keep in mind as you go and start building your next coding project. So my name is Henrik, and I'm here to help you learn the software skills and tools you need to grow in your software development journey. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing that you should know when it comes to coding projects is I like to think of 2 categories. There's the first one is toy projects, and then the second one is real life projects. So the way I think about it is toy projects are more for theory when you're trying to say you want to learn a new skill, a new programming skill, or you want to use a new library, or you want to just get a feel for how that programming language works. Then you want to build these toy projects, and these toy projects are more for theory. And then for the real life projects, those are more for practicality. So theory on one hand and then practice on the other. So which one do you want to do first? What is your objective? Do you want to learn more? Like you want to learn the theory more? You want to understand how the programming language works? Or do you want to learn how the framework works? Then you go for the toy project. But if you want to put into practice what you already know about that programming language, then you want to build a real life project. And that real life project is important because when you're building these coding projects, you want to build something that's actually practical and usable in the world. So some examples of toy projects would be like a Sudoku solver, or a tip calculator, or like a snake game. And these kinds of projects are not new projects. These are projects that people do all the time. And so that's why we call them toy projects, because they're not gonna be really useful in the real world. They're just for fun and mainly to help you understand how to use that programming language. You can think of toy projects like doing homework, right? When you get your homework from your teacher, you have these problems, and then you find the answer or the solution to those problems. You solve the problems, and then you compare them to the answers at the back of the book to see if you got the right answer. If you're a good student, that is. And you want to be a good student when it comes to developing your program. So when it comes to toy projects, you want to code it without looking at the solutions, without looking at how other people have coded it. And then after you've built that toy project, you can compare your solution to someone else's implementation, and you can compare how they did it versus how you did it. And then you can really grow from your toy project that way. Speaking of toy projects, I do have a free guide called my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And in that guide, I go through 4 toy projects. And the first one is actually the tip calculator. So you can download that guide, and in each week, you'll code one of these 4 programming projects. I go through the theory on how to build those programming projects. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. Okay, so how about the other category, real world projects? Now those real world projects are projects that you can use in the real world. And of course you can use that tip calculator in the real world. You can use that Sudoku solver and that snake game. You can use those in the real world, but I call those toy projects because those projects are probably not going to be used. Like you're probably not going to use those in the real world. Now, an example of a real world project is something like my personalized finance app programming guide, and that is an application that you can use for your personal budget. So in my personalized finance app, I call it personalized finance because it's an app that you can build for your own personal finances, and you can personalize the application to fit your needs. So in that application, in that guide, I teach you how to take your credit card transactions and then categorize them into different budget categories so you know how much you're spending. And that's why it's called personalized, because you can really personalize those different categories for yourself. So when thinking about these real world projects, you want to think of something that you can actually use in the real world in your everyday life. And so for that personalized finance app, this is something that can actually help me in my personal budget. When I was going through my personal budget, I was using an Excel spreadsheet, and then I was thinking, maybe there's a way that I could categorize my credit card transactions instead of manually putting them in different categories for my budget, for my Excel spreadsheet. I can just use my own program. So if you really want to have success in your coding project, you want to build a project that is actually fun. And so what I like to do is I either like to make games, or I want to build something that I'm actually going to use. So when I was a really young programmer, as a middle schooler, I had a TI-83, and as a middle schooler, there's not really something I can build that's actually something I can use in my everyday life. So what I coded mostly in that time were games. So that TI-83 that I got from my mom, it didn't have any games like my friends did. My friends had the TI-83 Plus, so they could actually use an application called Mirage and be able to run these games. So I had to build my own games. So when I had that TI-83, a lot of my programming projects back then were just games. Speaking of games, you also want to think of coding like a game. Whenever I watch YouTubers play Minecraft, it almost looks like they're building their own programming projects because they build these structures to help optimize their farm. And so those look like programs to me. And a lot of times with programming, sometimes you will get frustrated. And to overcome those frustrations, if you gamify it, then that really helps you stay in the game. Here are some programs that I built in the past. So one application that I built, I'm a Christian, so I want to pray for my friends and family. So I built this application that will give me 3 prayer requests a day to pray for. So that's one example. Another example is I'm also into options trading. So I built this application that will keep track of different option contracts that I've had, and it'll tell me when to roll a contract or when a contract is finished. So there's another application for that. And then another application I built was for my workouts. So when I work out, I wanted to create my own workout application that will tell me when to change the exercise. Like if I'm doing circuit training, if I want to change from push-ups to like sit-ups, then it will time it for me and it will tell me when to change. So that's another application that I built. All right, so that's my rant on toy projects and real world projects. So after you've come up with your idea for your program, for your next programming project, next you want to make a high level outline of your program. So for that high level outline, you want to come up with things like, how is the program going to start? How is the user going to execute the program? And when the user executes the program, what is it going to look like? Is it going to display a certain screen on the program, and how is it going to end? How do we know when the program is done? You can also break down different features of the program. So you can have a main feature and then some different sub features of that main feature, or if you have a list of features you want to have. So for that devotional application that I made, I wanted it to show me the Bible chapter I was going to read, and then the prayer requests that I was going to pray over, and then also wanted to show the Bible verse that I was going to memorize for that day. So those are just some features that you can have for your outline that you're gonna create. And then when you're coming up with those features, you want to break those features into different tasks that you can program. So you're laying out what do I need to code in order to program that feature. Another thing that you can include in your outline are what are the different objects or structures you're going to put to store data. So in my structs tutorial, I had a data object, or I had a structure called students, and then it had the name of the student in that structure. It had the midterms in that structure, the final exam score, and then the final grade in that structure. So those are some kinds of things to keep in mind that you can put in that outline. So the last thing I'll say about the high level outline is you really want to focus on the first task and the simplest task that you can build off of in your program. So in my devotional application, the first task that I think I did for that application was I wanted the user to input a Bible chapter, and then it would be able to use an API to return the chapter and display it on the screen. So that's the first thing that I did for that application. So you want to keep in mind that first step, or that first feature for your program, because I think starting a coding project is the hardest part. But once you've started the coding project and it's doing something that is actually exciting, then it's exciting to keep adding on to it, keep improving your program, adding more features to it, and eventually it'll be a project that's grown a lot, and then it's something that you're proud of. Okay, so after you've come up with your idea for your coding project, and then you've come up with that outline for your coding project, next you want to come up with a coding plan. And what I mean by coding plan is you want to set up a coding plan that will help ensure that you're actually making progress day by day. It's actually not hard to come up with your coding project and then coming up with the outline for your coding project. The hardest part is actually finishing your project and actually coding it. Coding projects can sometimes be intimidating because there's so much that you have to code. There's so many features that you want to put in there. But if you make progress day by day, you'll eventually get there. And that's why having a coding plan is so important. There's this popular book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and the gist of that book is that if you have these small habits, these small changes in your routine, they can lead to remarkable results. And one quote that I really liked from that book is that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so the idea there is that if you put a system in place to help you achieve your goals, that's what will actually get you to your goal. You don't get to your goal by setting the goal. You don't get to your goal by thinking about that goal and meditating on the goal. You actually get to that goal by having a system in place, and that system will help protect you and keep you on that path to achieving your goal. So to put it in another way, it's not about having a goal that's so high up there that it compels you and motivates you to reach that level of your goal, but rather it is the systems that you put in place that help you make progress over time. And if you have a good system in place, you will make good progress. And so that's the idea of falling to the level of your systems. You want to have a good system in place. If you don't have a good system in place, you're not going to make good results. So you want to have a good system in place, something that you're committed to, and have a coding plan that will help you make consistent progress on your coding projects. So what would a coding plan look like? A simple coding plan that I think is reasonable and something that you can strive towards is making a commitment to code 30 minutes a day, Monday to Friday. And I think that's good because it's consistent and it doesn't seem like much, but over time, you're starting to make a lot of progress on your programming project. And a lot of times I've seen beginners, what they do is they only code on Saturdays or Sundays on the weekends. And I think there's a problem with that because if you only code on those days, you can forget all of the things that you learned from the previous week and you have to relearn those things. Or another thing is sometimes weekends can get busy. There's a lot of things that can come up during the weekend that you don't anticipate. And so it prevents you from actually making progress on your coding project. And so I think if you have a commitment to code 30 minutes a day, it's not too much of time, but it's a good amount of time. And if you think about it, that's about like 2.5 hours a week. So I think that's good progress for your coding plan. So 2 quick encouragements for you as you start to code your coding project. First one is to start messy and clean up later. So what you really want to focus on is getting the program to work. So sometimes your program can look messy. You can have some print statements here that you don't really want in your final project, but having those print statements and debug statements in your program, that can actually help you have good visibility in your project. And so you should just leave them there and then clean up that code later. The important part is you want the functionality, and when you have the functionality there and it's giving you everything that you need, then you can just come back, clean up your code later, or make your code prettier later, or make the display that you're having in your project, make that display cleaner later. All right, my second encouragement for you is to use Git. And Git is just a way to have version control of your program. And if you don't know how to use Git, you can watch my other videos on how to use it. But basically, it's a good way of keeping and maintaining the progress in your programming project. So say this is the first version of your programming project, and then you build on it. You continue to build on it over time, and it's just a good way of saving your progress. So say you're over here in your programming project and say you messed up, and in this version of your code it's working. Git just gives you a good way to rewind back to a state where your code was working correctly, and then you can do a diff between these 2 versions of your code and see what lines of code messed up a certain feature in your program. All right, so those are the 3 things you should know when it comes to starting your coding project. First is come up with the idea of your coding project. Is it going to be a toy project or is it going to be a real world project? So come up with that idea first. Second one is to have a high level outline of your project. So have the idea of the structure of your project or your program and the different features that you're going to have, and also the different objects or structures to store your data. What kinds of structures are you going to have for your data? And then the last one is come up with a coding plan and a schedule on how you're going to make steady progress over time for your programming project. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. What are some programming projects that you're thinking to build right now? Let me know in the comment section, and I'd love to see what kinds of things you guys come up with. All right, like I mentioned earlier, if you're just starting off in your programming journey and you don't know where to start, you can download my 30-day beginner coding challenge. And it's a 30-day guide where I teach you how to build those 4 beginner programming projects. It's really beginner friendly, and I go step by step on how to build each one and go through the tutorials that you need to build each one. So download that in the link in the description. All right, that's it for this week's video. I hope it really helped you out. And if it helped you out, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to hear me talk more about coding projects, how to come up with them, or if you want me to break down some coding projects that I've done in the past, let me know in the comment section, and I'll be sure to come up with more content about that. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.